And we're live. Hey, all you crazy sci-fi and fantasy fans, it's time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. Just three nerdy veterans geeking out over our science fiction passions and fantastical fantasies. A place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. We are the podcast that puts the fun in dysfunction. So without further ado, Terry Mixon, can you introduce yourself to our listeners and viewers?
Sure. I'm a veteran as well. I'm a science fiction author that's written 30 some odd books, both individually and co-written them. And I used to be a contractor at NASA for about 20 years.
All right. And so the next part of the introduction, dear listeners, how we found them. So I actually found them back in the time when the dinosaurs roamed the earth. We were dodging hungry T-Rexes and started talking about books, and the rest, as they say, is history. That's how you remember it too?
Dinosaur steaks. That's exactly how I remember it.
All right. And now we changed the religion question just for you, but I know you're going to be heretical and get it wrong. So, Stargate SG-1, Stargate Atlantis, or Stargate Universe?
I think I'm going to go with the original Stargate.
The movie?
I liked the movie, but I prefer the TV series. After the first season, it needed a little breaking in.
I made the mistake of not previewing it and watching it with my son, figuring, oh, it's 80s and 90s TV, it's bound to be okay. And then the first made-for-TV movie, the 2-hour block before the season started, full frontal nudity. I'm like, ooh, cover your eyes, kid.
What?
Yeah, that was not expected. And since you got the last one wrong, because everyone knows Stargate Universe is awesome.
Excuse me, I need to disconnect this call. Apparently, there's something wrong here.
Star Wars, Star Trek, or Firefly?
Ooh, Star Trek.
Why?
Because Firefly, who cares? There we go. There's some heresy right there. And Star Wars, it's trash.
The first three were good. Everything that came after that was a little so-so, but I did like Clone Wars. If you watched the cartoons that Disney put out, so
The Mandalorian was good. Everything else, I'm not so sure.
I watched season 1 of The Mandalorian, and then budgetary reasons, I had to cancel Disney Plus, so I have not gone back to finish. But okay, that's fair. And then because we are polytheistic, Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings, or The Wheel of Time?
Lord of the Rings.
Don't mind him. He's just got cats going crazy in the background.
I need to spray some cats.
All right.
I'm busy.
So we here at the Blasters and Blades love both the fantastical and the scientific. So what was your first love, sci-fi or fantasy?
Science fiction, although I read a lot of fantasy when I was younger.
Do you remember what your first engagement with speculative fiction writ large was? Was it sci-fi or was it fantasy?
I'm almost certain that it was Lord of the Rings, probably The Hobbit to begin with.
Okay. I don't know how old you were. Did you watch the Hobbit that did the old style cartoon that came out back in, I think, the late 70s?
I saw it, but I think my first introduction was the printed word.
Okay. So what is it about speculative fiction writ large as a genre that you love?
I like telling stories, and that's a great way to tell stories that are fun, cool, and different than just wandering down the street.
Okay. So how did your love of speculative fiction as a genre transition into you writing stories in the space? You say you love telling stories. How did that start?
I'm a longtime role player. I do tabletop role-playing games and did a lot of them back when I was in the Army in the 80s. And that helped me with making characters and making stories and telling interesting stories. The way I got started writing is I got tired of not reading the kind of stories that I wanted to read. So I said, I'd just write it my own self.
Okay. So many authors will let their own real life experiences influence the stories they tell. Were there any specific formidable moments that shaped the kind of stories you tell?
No.
No?
No,
just the sum of your
big,
parts?
Just lots of little bitty parts that all come together.
Okay. So you mentioned that you served in the U.S. Army. So we ask all the authors who are veterans this question, but how do you feel like your time in uniform shapes the kind of stories you tell?
It definitely adds some truth to the basis of writing stories that have military in it, because there's a certain mindset that you just cannot deal with unless you've actually been there.
Fair. So when you enlisted back in the 80s, were you olive drab or did you come in at the BDU switch over?
BDUs.
Okay. Was it the vest or the web suspenders for your combat
Web
gear?
suspenders.
Okay. All right. So when you write these military stories, do you ever draw from people you knew in real life from when you served?
Maybe bits and pieces. Nobody in specific that I'm intentionally mimicking.
Okay. So you were in the wacky form of the Airedale side of things. So you played with helicopters. Those people weren't quite right anyway. So my first AIT we did, our school at Fort Eustis, for those of you who don't know, was right next to some of the helicopter mechanics. And so they were some unique characters.
I'll agree with that.
Were you one of those unique characters or were you the normal one?
I was one of those unique characters.
You're supposed to say you're the normal one and pretend.
Not at this late date. No, sorry.
So we talked a little bit about how your time in the Army affects the stories as you tell them. How do you think it affects the way you engage with content?
What do you mean by that?
So do you think having served in the military affects the way you engage with stories, say if they are about military or just have military stuff in them?
It's enough that if there's something ridiculous in the story, I'll put it down.
Okay. Are you one of those, because you're also a gun nut? I mean, a gun aficionado.
What?
Does that affect the way you read too? Do you ever like count bullets and be like, oh no, he shot too many times, that kind of stuff?
I don't count the bullets, but I have noted every time somebody's had a safety on a Glock.
I'm not much for pistols. I preferred long arms, but even I know that.
And it really annoys me when you've got an automatic pistol and they go click when they pull the trigger. You didn't notice the slide is locked back? That's odd.
I think too many people get their gun facts from badly done movies, and it shows.
Yeah, sadly, this is true.
But not everyone is in a place where they have ready access to guns. I get some of that, some of the European countries. So they get at least a little bit of leeway with me. But if you're American,
so what qualifies as ready access? You know, as an American, I have very firm views on what is ready access to firearms.
A lot of places, it's onerous levels of regulation to get access to a gun, to fire even at a gun club for target practice, layers of red tape and that sort of thing. So I have been told, at least like in England, for instance, if you're not of means, it's really hard to have time for that.
So you don't actually mean reach out and lay your hand on a gun at any time?
No, I mean at all. I mean, look at, for instance, Australia, they seized all of them, you know? So it's, well, they turned them in. I don't, mean to imply they just stole them.
Well, they had no choice about turning them in. So yeah.
Right. But just using that as an example of, if you don't have easy access to get it, I give you a lot more slack when you get the stuff wrong. So
I'll buy that.
All right, but this is not the gun hour, so we will move on.
What? Oh no, I'm on the wrong podcast.
You're on the wrong podcast. So transitioning from the writing side, let's talk about things from the fan angle. So have you got any cool fan art or had anybody cosplay your characters yet?
I've gotten one piece of fan art that somebody took my book and painted it on a brick. And because you asked about it, I wouldn't. Got it off the shelf.
Give me just a second. I'm going to give you solo layout so they can see it. It is glorious, and I salute whoever did that.
They even wrote the stuff on the back.
That is impressive, and if you drop it on them, you can, defend your house with it.
When I throw the book at somebody, I really throw the book at somebody.
It's a fully automatic assault brick. So that is impressive. Does he like sell or he or she, do they like do that for sale now, or was it just a one-off?
I haven't the slightest idea. It's been a number of years and I don't have any continuing contact with them. They reached out of the blue and said, I want to send you this. And I said, okay.
So if that was you could reach out. If you start selling them, there are a lot of people that would buy that kind of stuff from you. So just let us know. Now you can't change that book cover or the brick is wrong.
It's truth.
So has anyone done any of the cosplay? I know that might be a little more difficult because you're, how do I say this?
I'm not very description heavy. So, it's a little bit out there for that.
Someone would have to take creative license. I mean, you've described the color of the uniforms, but you leave a lot to the imagination. And I know it's a popular style. I'm more of the Tolkien fan. Describe everybody to glass blade.
And in 14 pages, we will describe this bush.
Yes. And I will be happy. You just got to describe the important things. But anyway, so has anyone tried cosplay for it yet?
No, not that I know of.
Okay.
I'm not that popular, man.
I don't know.
Who do you think I am? David Weber? No.
No, but you don't write waves of missiles, so you write the pew pews and the lasers.
I don't drop enough missiles to be on that radar.
No, you do not. So has anyone ever asked for your autograph?
Yes, I've signed a few books.
Do you remember the first time someone asked you to sign one of their books?
I'm pretty sure it would have been at the 20 Books conference. Maybe the first year? Not sure.
Wow, you had already been writing for a little bit after that.
I had.
At that point.
You know, I'm a writer. I don't go out and meet people that might actually have read my stuff.
Nobody's written into you and said, hey, can I buy a signed copy?
Actually, no. Nobody's ever asked.
Well,
Maybe I should put some up for sale on Etsy.
Now you know you can reach out and say, hey, sign my dang book, yo. And he'll make Donna like do everything for him, and then he'll sign it.
Yeah,
that's how that works, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So finally, what is the weirdest or funniest story about an interaction with a fan since you started writing? Obviously, keep it family friendly.
I think the strangest interaction is you. You know, you keep badgering me to come on your podcast. You keep
true.
Nagging me about how my covers don't look right, even though you're colorblind. That's pretty much it.
One comment on one book review, and you just never let it go.
Hey, what kind of guy do I look like? Of course I'm going to never let it go. You criticized a cover when you can't see the colors.
Well, then I criticized as I saw it. I still like it. I reread your books. And then because my memory is Swiss cheese, every time you put a new one, I end up starting from the beginning and listening from book one all over again. If you start getting up there in like the 20s and 30s, I might be in trouble.
I'm going to start writing book 15 probably early next month. So you're in big trouble, mister.
Yeah, I just bought the latest audiobook that Veronica put out, and I listened to the beginning. I'm like, I don't remember, so I'll probably only go back one book this time. But I had caught up with you up until the latest one. So,
well, thank you.
All right, so this is where we talk about everything you have written, Terry. So, can you give us the Reader's Digest highlight reel?
Everything, every single thing I've ever written.
We're not going to talk about your Chuck Tingle stuff. Just Terry Mixon.
I've written a number of short stories, been in a pile of anthologies. I've written the Empire of Bones series, 15 books, Humanity Unlimited, 5 for 4 or 5. I think he's got 5. A couple of singletons that the series never took off. And I teamed up with Glenn Stewart to write 5 books in his Vengeance series. Or Vigilante series, I think is the actual name. And I've got a new series with J.N. Chaney called The Last Hunter that I'm busy writing book 3 on, and book 2 comes out in a week.
You've arrived when you have more than you can remember. Do you keep a spreadsheet so you know?
I used to keep a spreadsheet, then I stopped.
It got to be too much work to update it?
I got to that point in my writing career where it was no longer important to me.
All right. So obviously all of that sounds fascinating, but today we brought you on to talk about your story, Warfish, in the Blaster Bolts eZine, which is, thank you to Mike Lafferty over at Fading Oak Games, the sponsor for today's episode. I have to say, I've badgered you forever and a day to get that back on the market after you pulled it. It is one of my favorite short stories. And I read it every so often because I like it that much, the way you used submarine warfare as an analog for space and made it believable without being ridiculous. So where did you get the premise for that story? How'd you come up with the idea?
Well, there's a book by the same name, Warfish, that was written about World War II submarining. And the story it was very much directly inspired by Lieutenant Commander Gritter, who was the commander of a submarine, or I guess he was a commander by the time he was done during the war. And so I pulled a lot of details from his stories and made them space.
So by the war, you mean World War II?
Yes.
Okay.
You mean there's been a war since World War II?
It's just a few. Although technically we haven't actually declared war, so there's just been policing actions, lots of them. So we are going to take a moment and we're going to look at that glorious cover. It's
pretty.
It is. Mike Lafferty with his Fainting Goats stuff, man. He got some good art for that. So did you get any say in that art process, or did they just slap it up there and you say it's pretty?
They slapped it up there and I say it's pretty.
Okay. Well, I'm going to zoom in so you can see. It's got some of the markings that make it so pretty. And if you get to find a copy at Kmart, it is only $2.94.
That's an X-Mart, my friend.
Oops. Well, we were all supposed to see Kmart with the X-Mart so they don't get sued. That's how that works.
So is there should there be like a flashing blue light on there somewhere?
Probably the blue light special is going on. So what would your 30-second elevator pitch for that story be?
That story would be, I don't know. I'm terrible at elevator pitches. I would say it is my version of the Silent Service taken into space. That's it.
Okay, you
I'm
clearly
terrible
don't
at
write
marketing.
enough.
See, terrible, awful.
You just don't write enough elevators, apparently.
Apparently not. I never have to actually make an elevator pitch.
All right, so what do you think that makes this story special on all the stories about space combat?
I think it's special because it's reaching back to the roots of modern combat. You're talking taking elements of something that was the last war that was fought militarily using what could be qualified as modern technology, if you don't count the police actions. This was something that engulfed the entire world, and it has meaning. And being able to take that and translate it into science fiction was both a privilege and an honor.
Okay. So does this story fit into a larger universe, or does it stand alone?
It could have been. I could easily have written a series that would have covered everything that was going on there. But who has time?
Clearly not you with 30 plus books that you're writing, but maybe when you write 35, you can go back. So
yeah, it seems like every year I've got more on my schedule. So that's hard.
Okay. So what would it take to get you to revisit the universe where this story takes place?
Piles and piles of money.
I mean, do we have a figure?
No, Fort Knox works. So, you start bringing out Fort Knox kind of money.
I'm just deciding, like, if I mortgage the house, do I have enough? I really liked it, but
keep your house, my friend. Keep your house.
So, what tropes do you play on when you wrote this story?
I played on the whole beneath the ocean. I used subspace, so you're slipping underneath reality into a different sphere. That's it's like close to our universe, but not quite there. And I particularly had a lot of fun figuring out how the periscope was going to work, sticking from one universe to another.
It was enjoyable. I think everyone should go out and get this and give it a read. I recommend it, like I said, all the time. I still have my version on the Kindle that I downloaded just to make sure they can't take it away from me. But it's that good. So
somewhere out there, I originally did a podcast of it with sound effects, and I have no idea. I don't actually have the files for it anymore. I think I put it on the Dead Robot Society at some point, but I don't personally have those files anymore. It's long lost.
I've been listening to the podcast since probably 2016, and I don't remember it. And that would have stuck out to me. I wrote
the story, 2013, 2012, something like that. And I made the podcast shortly thereafter.
Okay. Well, if you find it, dear listeners, when we share this, put it in the comment section because I'd like to give it a listen. Did you narrate it, or did you get Paul?
I narrated it myself and did the sound effects myself. So I'll have to see if somewhere on one of my old hard drives I actually still have that particular file lurking there. I haven't gone looking for it. I hadn't thought about it until you mentioned this.
That is awesome. I'm gonna search too from the Dead Robots archives, and I will link to the Dead Robot Society podcast in the show notes if you want to check it out. It is enjoyable if you like, not just if you don't want to be a writer, but you just like knowing how stuff is created. It's still fun, I think.
We've definitely moved into just being writers talking about creativity as opposed to specific writing issues, except for whatever we're covering that week.
Yeah, it's more stream of consciousness at this point, I think.
It is.
And sometimes with Paul, that can be a little scary. I'm just saying the man's a little touched. But so what genre or subgenre do you think this story would fit into?
This would be definitely military science fiction.
And what is it about military science fiction that appeals to you?
As a former soldier, I think I have a connection, of some kind of weird connection to where I like reading about that type of story.
Okay. Relive the glory days, as it were.
Well, I never actually got to go to war and fight, so I can't relive the glory days that I never had.
I mean, but you got to play with helicopters and do cool
I
stuff.
did.
So
I got to blow up things on the training range.
that is fun too. And nobody shoots back, so that's always a plus. All right. So we've talked a little bit about the warfish, and I think because it's a short story, I don't want to dive too deep because if we did, it'd be all kinds of spoilers. So what else are you working on right now?
I am in the process of writing up book 3 in the Last Hunter series right now. I'll probably have it off to the publisher at the end of this month.
So what's the premise of that universe? And we'll just go with book 1. So if people haven't started it, they can kind of get an idea.
Have you seen the movie Battleship?
I have.
That actually is something of the flavor of that story. It's having to take a museum that used to be a powerful warship and take it to war because it's the only hope to save humanity.
I'm assuming it's a spaceship, though, because it's sci-fi.
Oh, it is. A kilometer-long asteroid with more weapons than you can count. If it actually was all put together, had a crew, and people weren't trying to just cut his legs out from under him as he's trying to build it back up.
Do you have lines in there like, that's no moon, baby?
I did not put that line in there, no.
Probably good.
But thanks for asking.
So do you take your level of irreverence with a little bitty, fun quips, or a little bit straighter shooting? Because Jay and Chaney can go either way, so it's hard to judge with his writing. He could be serious and he could be,
I have been known to put some quips of my own in there, yes.
Okay. So is this one tighter on the action, or is it more, longer arching saga like Empire of Bones?
Longer arching saga.
Okay.
It's definitely space opera with strong military flavor.
So what level of description might we expect? Is it about on par with what you normally do? Because I know
it is. It's on par with what I normally do. Although I'll admit that I described the uniforms that they had to wear in more detail than I usually do.
Did you go with what did you go with for your inspiration for that?
I went with old style naval uniforms, great coats and the hats with the peaked caps that, if you watch Star Blazers, you're not too far off in my description of that uniform. And I'll admit that for the dress uniforms, I definitely went way fancier and more like, I don't know, maybe almost anime-ish type uniforms.
Did you have to sell Jeff on that one, or did Chaney go with it right off the bat?
I slipped it in when he wasn't looking.
So are you using your normal editors for this, or did you use
It's all variant.
It's all variant. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I think Molly edits for him. She does good work. I've worked with her before. So how long do you see this series going?
I think the last time we talked, he said we since he said it publicly, I can say it as well. I think that we're looking at a minimum of 6 to 8 books with targeting 12, and we'll see what goes on beyond that.
Is it going to be out in audio as well for those that like to be read to instead of read?
Well, book 1 is already out in audio with Jeffrey Kafer doing the narrating. Book 2 is in the process of being recorded, and book 3, got to finish it first.
Okay. So what's your publication schedule? Are you doing just as quickly as you can get them? Or are you alternating them around other series and books?
He would like them as fast as I can do them. And, I would love to give him that, but I owe my fans something as well. So I'm writing 2 books for him and 1 of my own, and then going back and doing 2 for him.
So for 1 of your own, are you going back to the Imperial Marines, which is the pre-fall Terra from Empire of Bones, or are you doing the main series?
The last gap that I had, I wrote book 1 for him, and then turned around and wrote the Imperial Marines book. I wrote 2 books for him. I'll finish that at the end of this month, and I'll go write the Empire of Bones novel. So I'll give him 2 more, then I'll go back to Imperial Marines.
Okay, so you alternate. Are you still
Yes.
planning on the spinoff that you had talked about with the Empire of Bones?
No,
With no,
I would love to do that. I just do not have time.
yeah, that'd take a lot of oversight to get the canon right. So, and yes, time is an essence, but we do promise the readers that these anthology short story interviews will be quick, and I promise you that as well. So, as this interview winds down, was there anything that we didn't ask about Warfish that you wanted to tell the listeners?
If you have not read any books about service in World War II, do yourself a favor and go buy yourself a copy of Warfish. I think you'll find it enjoyable. That's what I think.
Okay, and we didn't talk about it, so I'm going to throw this out there real quick. Is what cool thing about this eZine that Fane and Goat put out, in addition to the art in the short story, they also put White Star, which is the old white box sort of original style D&D type system, and they've got some game content in there and some stat blocks, and so you could use that to incorporate in your game, or use it to set up your own game version of the Warfish story if you wanted to, which is kind of cool. He's got a little bit of everything in all of the zines. So if you like gaming or you like short stories, I suggest you check them all out. But I would be remiss if I didn't remind you, dear listener, to please be kind and speak your mind on the reviewing platforms. Your reviews help the right readers find the right books, and you can find this eZine over at DriveThruRPG, where you can also review them after you read them. And Terry wants nothing but 5 stars from me because it is awesome.
Well, thank you. I'll take all the 5 stars I can get.
Absolutely. And I know at some point in time, when we interviewed Mike Lafferty about this one, he did say that there was plans in the future after he had a X number out that they're going to put a bound copy together with a Kickstarter. So if you want to get the compilation in hardback, that will be available at some point. But support them now and buy these. These are amazing.
You can't get to the hardback unless you buy the stuff to get there.
Yes. If you want the authors to keep producing certain things, you have to show them with your money that you like it. So, all right, Terry, how can listeners find you on the wild, wild interwebs?
You can find me on Amazon. I'm the only Terry Mixon writing science fiction, and you can see my face right here. My picture is on my page. You can also find me at terrymixon.com.
All right. And you can find us, dear listener, on Twitter at twitter.com/SF_fantasy_show, Sierra Foxtrot _fantasy_show. You can email the show at blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com. Again, blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com. And Doc will be happy to answer those emails for you. So just be polite, and you're not talking to me, so you can use your manners. You can find us on Facebook, where all the shenanigans happen, at facebook.com/groups/Blasters and Blades podcast. Again, /groups/Blasters and Blades podcast. You can find our website at anchor.fm/blasters and blades. Again, anchor.fm/blasters and blades, or you can support the show for as little as 99 cents a month. Or you can support the show over at buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Again, buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. I promise if you put in the show notes or in the notes that it's for the podcast, I will keep my co-hosts, Doc Cisca and Nick Garber, duly intoxicated. They will drink until their liver surrenders. And if Doc was here, she'd tell you she ain't no quitter. So thank you for spending some of your precious time with us. For Nick Garber and Doc Cisca, I am J.R. Handley, and this was the Blasters and Blades podcast. We'll be back next week at the same time, where we'll indulge our love of nerd culture, cheesy jokes, and all things that go boom. All right, Terry, it was a pleasure.
Thanks for having me on, man.